Dying Light the Beast is just a month away, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to a preview event where I got 4 hours of hands-on playtime with the game early. I got to experience the combat, the first-person parkour, exploring the new setting in Castor Woods, playing as Kyle Crane again from the first game. I tried to survive the terrifying night times in this game. I drove around in a vehicle, and I also got to take the new beast powers for a spin. Before we jump in, a few things you should know. First off, I'm not going to spoil anything. We have some pretty strict restrictions on cutscenes, so I'm not even going to show you that much. There is going to be some B-roll spliced in here, so if you see any kind of HUD elements, that means I'm playing. If you see no HUD, that means it's B-roll. We played this on a really high-end PC, and I don't know if the build was just super polished, but I didn't really run into any performance issues whatsoever. And I also played this on a controller. And finally, thanks to Techland for inviting me to this event. And for full transparency, both my travel and accommodations were covered. Over my 4 hours of playtime, this is what I got to experience. They kicked us off right after the starting cutscene at the very beginning of the game, which they didn't show to us for story spoiler reasons. In case you missed the trailers or you're not quite sure about Dying Light the Beast's story, just broad strokes here. Kyle Crane returns from the first game. This takes place 13 years after the events in Haran. All we know is because he was bitten in Haran, he was captured and experimented on by a guy named the Baron, and that's given him these insane beast-like powers. And basically, he's on a revenge quest. He wants to find this guy and take him out for all of the torture he's experienced over more than a decade. So the structure of the story missions that I played revolved around the chimeras. These are special types of zombies. They kind of feel like bosses in the game where you're looking for them and then you find them and then you have this big face-off with a unique zombie. I did several of these boss battles by the end of the preview, and if you were looking for a more brutal experience, like more difficult, I died several times during these. I think you absolutely get that from Dying Light the Beast. Along the way, Kyle makes some friends. He meets some survivors, some people who I'm not sure what their intentions are. Either they're helping him or hurting him. That's something that I'll leave for you guys to find out in the game. The final thing I'll say on story is that having Kyle Crane back makes such a big difference. And that's no offense to Aiden or his voice actor, but Roger Craig Smith and that voice is so iconic and so central to me when I think of why I enjoy Dying Light 1. And so having him back for the Beast is huge. It makes a big difference. So there are a total of 4 story missions that I played in this preview. Once I was done with that, I was free to do whatever I wanted. So I used that time to play 2 of the side quests, which were optional, and they were super in-depth, like fully voiced, take you on a little adventure, give you a reward, and then bring you back. Very similar to what I played in Dying Light 2. I cleared out a couple of safe zones, places you can sleep and check out your stash. I ran across a couple emergent events where there's some humans, some of the Baron's men that were guarding some loot, or a survivor that needed my help. And of course, I delved into a couple of the dark zones where you can find high-value loot, but of course, it's a dangerous thing to do. All of this stuff, if you played this series, this should sound familiar, because it's very much the same kinds of events you've played in the past, but in this new setting with new stories and new characters. Let's talk about the gameplay for a second. Now, Dying Light the Beast feels, again, very familiar to the other games, but I think it tries to be a little more brutal and less forgiving than Dying Light 2. At least that's what I'm telling myself, because I struggled at the very beginning. And maybe that's because I didn't have a lot of skills like I do in Dying Light 2, at the end of my playthrough. But throughout my time with the game, it felt like I was struggling. Like I was just looking for rags and alcohol in order to make a bandage just to survive the next fight. I was looting all the bodies. I was desperate looking for materials to make items like the decoy or the Molotov, just to, give me that extra leg up. And that struggle, that experience is something that personally speaks to me. That's what's fun. I want to feel like I'm barely scraping by, and that's what I felt like in this game, at least early on. In terms of specifics with the combat, everything works exactly the same. I mean, you're gonna kick zombies away, you're always managing your stamina, you can dodge, you can grapple and throw them into objects. You're really in trouble if you get swarmed by a group of them, so a lot of the times it doesn't make sense to stop and fight. It makes sense to run away and regroup. The parkour felt great to me, although, again, I will say it felt like I sucked at it. I think I just need more practice with it, but I've got some very nice, smooth B-roll footage to show you guys what it looks like to run around the rooftops of this game. It's really, really fun. That was something I was a little worried about with the setting. When I hear Castor Woods, I don't think buildings, and it's kind of like the Assassin's Creed problem, where you change the formula if there's not a lot of things to climb and jump on. That's not the case with this game, at least in the Old Town area where I played most of the first 4 hours of the game in. There's tons of verticality. There's a lot of opportunities to jump and run between buildings, go inside of them, jump out of them. There's also this new pole vault thing. I don't remember that from Dying Light 2, but I could be wrong about that. It allows you to jump across gaps, and I found that really fun. One thing that disappointed me, though, and I noticed pretty early on, is that they took away the little XP boosts you get from performing parkour. In fact, you don't get experience separately from doing things like combat and then parkour. The skill tree is just one big skill tree now, and you can choose which direction you go in. Now, that does give more flexibility, I think, in general, but for me, I liked the little dopamine hits I would get from performing those actions. It felt very appropriate. Like, if I'm good at parkour, I should get more parkour experience. If I'm good at combat, I should get more combat experience. I don't think this is something that's going to ruin my experience of the game, but just a little thing that I noticed. If you're wondering about human enemies, in the first few hours of the game, I ran into like 2 or 3 pockets of the Baron's men, and each of them had melee weapons, no guns, and the combat experience felt very similar to Dying Light 2, which is to say better than Dying Light 1, like a revamped version where you can parry attacks, you can grapple better, and it didn't feel as impossible to take care of them. I found it pretty fun to lure zombies into these fights and let them kill off the enemies for me so I could just take the loot and run away. Speaking of guns, so you do get a pistol really early on, but you don't get a lot of ammo, and the game tells you you need to go to these armored convoys to get more of them, but you need like an access key, an access card to get into them. So what I'm trying to say is there are guns in Dying Light the Beast, but they're not very accessible early on, which I think is a good thing, personally. I think when you add too many guns to a zombie game, it sort of breaks the experience and the feeling of survival and struggle that's really core to what you're supposed to feel. But I'm glad that guns are in the game, unlike Dying Light 2, where they added it later. In this game, there are guns from the rip, which feels like the rest of the game is probably better tuned around those guns. In terms of tools and gadgets, there really weren't a ton at the very beginning. You had your basic decoy, which lures zombies to a specific location. You have throwing knives you can use in ranged combat or to help you whenever a zombie grabs you. You have the UV flashlight, which I used in some of the dark zones to make sure zombies weren't just swarming me. And then you have hand grenades and Molotovs that you can use in a pinch for a little bit extra damage. Looking at the skill tree, there's definitely a handful more things you can unlock down the road and maybe some stuff during the story as well. Crafting and modifying and upgrading weapons is back, and again, very familiar to Dying Light 2. There's a couple different modules that you can customize, like the shaft of the weapon or the blade, the tip of the weapon. I unlocked several different blueprints in my playtime. The only one I was able to build and add to a weapon was the Venom mod, and it worked exactly the same. You just apply the poison, it builds up over time, and then deals damage. For the most part, I used a machete, like 90% of the time, but there was plenty of weapon variety. Like I found axes, shovels, hammers, pipes, pretty much your garden variety zombie game weapons. And similar to previous games, your weapons will break down over time. So you need to have scrap material that you can just very quickly within the gameplay pull up your weapon wheel, hold down a button to repair your weapon, and then you're good to go. Something that you should absolutely take away from this video is that the core gameplay loop of Dying Light the Beast is the same as it's been in previous Dying Light games. I'm talking about the way that combat feels, dodging enemies, conserving your stamina, parkouring through the world, searching for items, like all of that stuff is exactly what you would expect. The biggest new addition to Dying Light the Beast, of course, is the beast powers and abilities. This is something you're going to use in combat. It feels almost like a super ability in like Overwatch or a hero shooter for some reason to me. You press both sticks in and then you become pretty indestructible and you deal a lot more damage. Over time, you'll gain beast skill points. So there's a beast skill tree that you can go through and unlock more abilities. While I was playing plane, I unlocked the slam ability, so I would hold down RT and Kyle would basically deal a bunch of damage to any zombies, any enemies right in front of him. Now, I was a little worried about this because I'm not a big fan of games that have an easy mode, where you just press a button and suddenly the game's just super easy and you just destroy everything in front of you. But by the end, I found myself kind of liking it because it didn't come around too often. And it also seemed to come around when I needed it most. Like I was in a bad situation, I was about to die, I was struggling in combat. Oh look, I've got beast mode. It very well was the reason why I was able to defeat some of the early game bosses. So I want to say the game is almost tuned for the beast. Like it wants you to use it. Like I said, it wasn't something I was super looking forward to, but I ended up enjoying it because it felt necessary. Whether or not you're gonna like that, of course, is up to you. Something I was curious about but didn't get the answer to is whether or not you can reject the beast. Can I, as Kyle Crane, say, no, I don't want to become this monster, I just want to stay a human? Or maybe it's something you can't control. I don't know what the answer is to that question, and maybe we just have to wait for launch. Let's switch gears now and talk more about Castor Woods, this setting. So this is set in a more rural setting than both Dying Light 1 and 2. It's a lot more similar to Dying Light The Following, which, if you remember, is the DLC in Dying Light 1 where they introduced vehicles. It's no coincidence that vehicles are back in this game because you quite frankly need them to get between big locations. There's some wooded areas, just some desolate roads where, yeah, you'll find some zombies, maybe a little point of interest that you can stop and look at and loot. But this map very much takes place in a natural location. By natural, I mean there's woods, there's mountains, there's hills, there's stuff you need to climb, and a lot of times it just makes more sense to use a vehicle. So it was really fun to me to hop in this thing and mow over zombies. I used it in a couple of combat situations where I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm actually gonna get in the car and just mow over some of these guys just so I can survive. But similar to The Following, these things are not indestructible. Like if you crash your car, it's probably going to explode. If you get a lot of zombies on it and you don't try to get them off, it's going to explode. These trucks will also run out of fuel, so it's not a situation where you're going to find one and then use it the entirety of the game. It's a lot more likely that it's going to blow up for some reason, or you're going to run out of fuel and have to abandon it. The reason I'm focusing on this so much is because, yeah, adding vehicles to a zombie game can sometimes ruin the experience, ruin that tension and that struggle. I didn't feel that in Dying Light the Beast, at least so far. Like I mentioned when I talked about parkour, Castor Woods still has what I would call urban areas where there's tons of buildings that you can explore. And so that feeling is not completely lost in Dying Light the Beast, but the terrain overall is different. It's a different map than we've had before. But the color palette that they use to design the environments in this game and the lighting and the way that it looks when the sun is setting, it really reminds me of Dying Light 1 and how that game felt. You also get that feeling with, I think, the zombies. The zombie design in this game, they're very kind of gray looking and decrepit and more horror coded versus Dying Light 2, which I felt at times felt more like a zombie amusement park than an actual setting with, you know, real terrifying zombies. I really appreciated the weather effects in this game. It feels like they put a lot of work into making the world feel real when some weather rolls in, a storm comes in, and it's just pouring, and you can see all the vegetation moving around and the wind shaking the trees. It's really cool. Coming from Dying Light 2, the Beast has very impressive interiors too. So if you're just running around Old Town, for example, and you stop inside, you're gonna see a very detailed bedroom or, you know, a kitchen or whatever might be there. Similar to Dying Light 1 and 2, there are some copy-paste environments inside, so you're gonna find like the same layout in some buildings, but that really didn't bother me. I was more focused on using Survivor Sense and looting around to find materials for crafting. Also, Castor Woods has a different side to it, and you might have seen this with the marketing for the game, but also the event space where I got to play Dying Light the Beast was decked out in what I would call this sort of satirical, ironic theme of, welcome to Castor Woods. Everything is totally fine. Here's Bober the Beaver, our mascot. Please come and enjoy the beauty of our town. That's a very familiar zombie trope, right? The feeling that everything's okay, but actually the zombie apocalypse is here and everything is most certainly not okay. I think that's going to be baked into some of the more side content and the world building as you sort of figure out What happened to Castor Woods? Why did it descend into, the apocalypse? The final thing I want to talk about with this preview is the nighttime gameplay. What does it feel like to try to survive during the night in Dying Light the Beast? And I'm happy to report it feels great. It feels a lot more scary than Dying Light 2. And I was talking about this to one of the technical designers, I believe was his role on the QA team at Techland, and he was saying, yeah, that was the intention. We wanted to make nighttime scarier. That feeling that you got from Dying Light 1, where you were so terrified to go outside that for the most part you didn't, because it was that scary. That's the feeling I got from trying to survive during the nighttime. And I say trying because it was so difficult. Like, I was struggling so much to live because the volatiles were insane. I remember one of the biggest pieces of feedback that the community gave for Dying Light 2 was that the nights were not dark enough. That is not going to be a problem, I can tell you, for Dying Light the Beast. It's really dark. All you have is your flashlight, and you can hold the button to look behind you, but I would not recommend it because, again, it is terrifying. If that's the kind of feeling that you're looking for from this game, then I think you'll be happy. So that was a lot of specifics on my experience with Dying Light the Beast. I'm sure you're wondering, what did I think about this game? Did this make me more excited to play the full game when it comes out on August 22nd? And the answer is yes. I mean, if we're being honest, I was always going to play Dying Light the Beast, but now that I know a little bit more about the story and how this game feels and how it's trying to draw on inspiration of how the first game felt, which I prefer personally, I can't help but be excited for it. It ticks a lot of boxes for things that I was looking for. Of course, there were a few things that I mentioned in this video that I was like, I don't know about that change, but by and large, this is a Dying Light game, and it's also the kind of Dying Light game that I prefer. I want to feel that struggle. I want to feel like I'm barely surviving. I want this desolate zombie apocalypse feeling zombie game, rather than, like I said, at times, Dying Light 2 felt more like an amusement park, more like a theme park of a zombie game, rather than that real struggle feeling zombie game. Of course, this is only my impressions on the first 4 hours. I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this game dozens of hours in, right? But from what I played, I've really enjoyed my time with it. And what I always appreciate about a Techland game is that they don't abandon it. They're gonna put the game out, and if something's not working, they're gonna try to fix it. They're gonna patch it, and they're gonna add new content well after launch. It actually blew me away. While I was there, I was talking to several creators and friends, and they're like, yeah, Dying Light came out in 2021, and that blew my mind. I cannot believe it's been 4 years since that game. And from what I know, it's getting pretty consistent updates and new content. And so that's something that you know you're going to get from Dying Light the Beast, because that's just how Techland does it. So yeah, I had a really good time with the game, playing it before launch, and I'm excited to play it when it comes out. That is it for this one, guys. Before we wrap, though, once again, thanks to Techland for the invitation. It always just feels so cool to be recognized and invited to stuff like this, and the opportunity to play a game early, give some feedback, and talk to developers, the people that actually have spent years of their lives working on this thing, is such a cool experience. And so I really appreciate the invite, and I'm glad I was able to share this with you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, remember to hit that like button. Also, subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this, and ring the bell so you don't miss my next one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.